Okay. Hello, my name is Armando Say. I'm with the Maryland Innovation and Security Institute and Dreamport, and I'm happy to help moderate this session with the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Accreditation Board, and the chair of the Credentialing and Accreditation Committee, Jeff Dalton. Jeff, great to see you. You're looking good there.
Good afternoon, Armando. Finally, great to meet you in person, so to speak, in person.
Yeah, how about that? That's the way we meet in person these days, right?
No doubt about that.
So tell me a little bit about your committee. We have a whole audience. You guys have some
Oh,
of the most
excellent.
popular
Yeah,
topics, and I'd
absolutely.
love to understand what you guys are all about and what your objectives are and that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people have been asking that question. And I joined the AB back in late January and was tasked with leading the credentialing, what was called the Credentialing and Accreditation Committee then. Now we call it the Credentialing Committee, just because it's really hard to say two long words in a row, I guess. But so we're tasked with trying to figure out exactly what are the credentialed or, if you will, certified roles that things like assessors and instructors and other roles that might be affected by these assessments. What are the individual roles that need to be defined, and what are the prerequisites, the training, the examination, and the recurrency requirements for those roles? And as it turns out, there's more roles than you might imagine. A lot of people thought, and I thought getting into it, we'd have to figure out how one becomes an assessor. But there's different kinds of assessors. There's different levels of assessors. There's a pathway to become an assessor, and all of those have roles. We also had to define the various organizations that were recognized within this ecosystem. So C3PAOs is something that everyone talks about, knows what they are, or at least has an idea of what they are anyway. But there's also training providers, and there's people to build training materials, and there's a number of different accredited organizations that had to be defined. So our job is to create a framework around what all of those are, figure out how they all work together, and get that through the whole process so the board would finally approve it, and then we can move on to the next step. So that's what we're working on right now.
So yeah, you talked about three PAOs and C3 PAOs. It's funny, I see that both of those terms used. What is the term you guys are going to settle on?
Yeah.
Because I think the C3 PAO is kind of like a FedRAMP thing, right? That's kind of was
Right.
born out of
Yeah.
that. And then I see some people say, well, if it's not FedRAMP, is it really just a third-party assessment organization?
That's a really good question. And I don't know that the answer is, has a substantive effect on what they do. But we did have that debate because early on in the committee, we decided that the word credentialing would be used for individuals, for people, and the word accreditation would be used for organizations, just so we could keep them straight as we were working on them. And inside of that, the credentialing committee decided that the credentialed individuals would mostly be certified, but the accredited organization would mostly be licensed. And then somebody said, well, what about certified third party, the C letter? And we're like, oh, we're kind of stuck in there because we had already kind of thought we weren't going to call them certified as opposed to licensed, which functionally has no difference in this context because they're not taking exams or anything to become certified. They're really licensed. So I don't know. We're using the term C3PAO right now still. But that's a really interesting question. But there's a little bit of history there, kind of a fun story. And currently, the C's still in there.
Okay, fantastic. So I know that the world, and literally the world, I deal with a lot. I'm not part of the accreditation body, but sometimes I feel like I am because I get rocks thrown directly at me
Sure.
virtually
Yeah.
via the internet because they know I engage with various members of the organization on a regular basis, and we're working really alongside each other in terms of our DoD efforts, and that some of the work that we're doing directly ties to you guys, but then what you guys are going to be putting out on the street. But I know you have a presentation. You want to get ready to kind of like share
Sure.
your screen and show us what you got and tell
Sure. I
the
can show
story.
you a couple of things. Nothing too detailed, but I wanted to share with everybody where the credentialing committee is in defining all the various roles. I should tell you that After this is completed, and we're very close to having it completed, we've already shifted, and some of us, into defining the assessment methodology and the kind of step-by-step method that assessors will use to provide CMMC assessments. And of course, we're drawing from many DIPCAP and FedRAMP and CMMI and many other models that are out there that have already done this. We're not created from scratch, but there are some unique things. So we're going to work on that next. But this was kind of the first big deliverable here. So I want to share with you the certified professionals that we believe are required to operate a credible and a consistent and a robust certification organization that can handle the kind of volume. And I think people need to appreciate, the volume here. The volume of CMMC assessments will far exceed any other certified evidence-based model that's out there. It will far exceed CMMI. It will far exceed ISO. It will far exceed everything that's out in the market today. So we're trying to be really careful about really locking this stuff down so that it's scalable and that it can handle the kind of volume that everybody's saying that we're going to see. 200,000-300,000 companies every 3 years, and after that it could expand beyond DoD. We don't know yet, but that's what some people are saying. So we really want to make sure that we have all the right roles. We can't just throw assessors out there and say go do it. So the very first credentialed role is this certified professional, the CP. This is a pre-assessor role, and it's the gateway. So all professional certified assessors, and there's a caveat to all of this that I'll get to on the next page, but long term, any certified role that comes through the AB will start with the certified professional. And the certified professional ensures that you are well versed in the CMMC model itself. So for someone that's been working with the model or maybe some other similar models for a long time, this will be fairly simple to achieve this, a class and a small exam. For someone who's just getting into this part of the business, it'll be more difficult. So this is the gateway.
Involved with that level? Is it 40 hours or 38 or?
We don't have the final class established yet. There is a draft of the class, and it's looking like about 24 to 28 hours right now. But it hasn't been finalized. I would say we have 3 or 4 more iterations to get through before we can call that training finished. At least and I want to be clear that there is an initial rollout that's kind of a beta period that will be different than what actually happens long term. So, but I believe the professional training, and Ben could speak more to that than I could, but I think it's about 24 to 30 hours of time. The other thing about the certified professional is that it gives someone inside of a company, like say inside of a Lockheed or a Raytheon or even one of the smaller contractors, someone that has expertise and accreditation, or I should say credential in CMMC to really help their company improve. So we improve their cyber stand. So there's really no limit to how many people could become CPs, but it is required for the track to get on the assessor track, and it is required if you want to be on an assessment team, which is kind of, you can think of it as kind of an apprentice or an assistant to the assessor. So that's the first certification that we agreed to. The next one is the one everybody wants to know about. It's the certified assessor. Once one has completed the professional cert, which is really the foundation of CMMC knowledge, they need to go through an assessor training class, which we haven't defined this yet fully, but it's probably 16 to 24 hours of additional training, which is specific around the assessment methodology, the step-by-step process that one goes through to formalize, to plan, to execute, and to report on an appraisal and assessment in a credible way, so that when the AB reviews it, it's accepted, goes through their quality process. So there's some additional training, and there will be multiple levels of assessors. So there will be a large amount of level 1 assessments that need to be done, and we will authorize level 1 assessors as certified assessors. We will also have certified level 3 assessors and then certified level 5 assessors. And anyone that has one of those designations can perform assessments for anyone, any assessment lower than that. So someone that has a level 5 cert can perform 1, 2, 3, or 4 level assessments and so on and so forth. So we're expecting a lot of level 1 assessors, at least initially, because so many people in the DIB are going to be level 1, so many companies. But we will, of course, expect at least level 3 assessors out of the gate, quite a few of those as well. The next one is the certified instructor. So this is who is certified to actually teach either the professional track or the assessor track. They go through a whole program on their own, and we are going to require that instructors be assessors as well. And they must be assessors at the level that they're teaching at. So if they're an assessor at level 3, they can teach up to level 3 of the assessor class, and they're going to manage the quality and the knowledge that way. The master instructor is the 4th one. That's who teaches the instructors. So it's kind of a train the trainer environment. Initially, that'll probably be someone that works for the accreditation body, just because it's a chicken and egg problem, right? We don't have any assessors out there, so somebody has to teach the teachers. So we're going to have this master instructor role, and this individual or individuals will primarily, at least initially, be AB employees, but we imagine a day when they become independent as well. And then finally, the last role is the certified quality auditor, the CQA. And this is the individual who, on the AB side, ensures that the assessments have been executed in accordance with the methodology, have been executed credibly, and meet the standards for the AB to stand behind the maturity level certification. So those are the 5 certified roles that we imagine long-term for the AB that we have now fully defined and fleshed out and defined what their roles and what their prerequisites and what their training requirements are going to be.
Let me ask you about the CQA role, the CMMC-AB Quality Auditor. Does that title come from one of the other, maturity model quality jobs or roles or standards, that kind of thing, or is that something that you guys came up with originally?
I don't believe it came directly from any of those. I know that there is, I think maybe in the ASQ world, they do have something with a similar title. I'm not real familiar with that one, but this is something that we came up with on our own without any direct input from any of those models.
So your committee is working on the quality standards for the CQA? Is that something that's happening now, or you see happening later, that kind of thing?
Well, when you say quality standards, I'm not 100% sure what you're referring to, but
maybe the metrics, maybe.
Yeah, this is more of ensuring that the assessment was conducted in accordance with the methodology. Okay. So imagine how this will work. An experienced assessor conducts a level 3 assessment for some unit within Raytheon, produces the results, provides the report, and sends it to the AB for approval. And the AB will take responsibility for, a blessing, so to speak, every single assessment before they grant the certification. And that's just makes sense because they're the ones standing behind it. In order to do that, the AB, which in the future will be, a staffed, funded organization, will have people that look at the assessments and make sure that the appropriate planning was done, the appropriate interviews were conducted, the appropriate data was collected, the appropriate data was analyzed and captured, the scoring was done properly, and that all of the activities that we would expect a professional assessor, one of our CAs, to conduct were in fact conducted with integrity. And so in that way, we're ensuring that the process was followed properly, and they will bless or score the outcome of the assessment and say, yes, this was followed properly. We accept this assessment as being credible. And that's what we mean by a CQA.
So CQA would take the CMMC-AB professional course. Yes. Prior to being, allowed to practice as a quality auditor. Would they take the assessor course as well?
Yes, we're requiring the CQAs as a prerequisite to be assessors so they understand exactly what they're looking at. That's an excellent question.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense in that model. And then they'll do the reviews, because then one of the big questions that industry has is, as the independent assessors, hit the street at some point in the future, how are they going to get measured, and how are debates? Hey, I think I met it, but my assessor said I didn't. Who's the arbiter of that? And obviously,
Yeah,
a quality standard kind of sets a sort of a defined, or defined metric or defined review that says there's a review process that kind of communicates what's coming back from the field.
sure. That's exactly what it is. That, of course, there's also the assessment guide that the standards committee is developing that will define the use cases and the scenarios for each control and practice so that people will understand what's required. And so the CQA will also be able to map to that. We have been working on our adjudication process. It's not quite completed yet, but we're pretty close, where to address the situation you just asked about, whether a company says, hey, we thought we made it, but the assessor said we didn't. We need the AB to weigh in and make a call. Somebody somehow has to make a call in that scenario. So the certified quality auditor, being a certified assessor, will examine the controls that are in dispute and make a call about the outcome.
So do you see that the CQA process being, is it a manual process, or is it a template, or?
I think there'll be some tools involved, obviously. There'll be a sampling algorithm because there's just no way to humanly perform rigorous QA on 300,000 assessments.
Right.
So there'll definitely be a sampling algorithm. We're not quite there yet because we're still kind of in beta mode, and I'll get to that on the next slide.
Okay.
But so sampling algorithm, there will be tools, there will be some automation in there, and assessments are human events. See, this is where the industry is kind of getting a little bit disjointed, I guess I should say, is what's the difference between an audit and an assessment? And an audit is a yes/no answer to everything, yes or no. An assessment is a more human activity, and the CMMC has a human component starting in level 2, where it talks about processes and institutionalization of actions and behaviors. It has behavioral model flavor to it in level 2, and you just can't do that with tools. You can't. Do people really understand the policy? Do people really understand the procedure here? You can't necessarily evaluate that automatically. So the CQA is going to be a kind of a combination of tool and judgment calls based on experience and templates and checklists and things like that.
Yeah, in our discussion with Ben from the training committee, we talked about the human component and the fact that the human is very challenged in contemporary times today, aren't we? In terms of how do you accomplish the human component in a world where everyone's recommending that we stay 6 feet apart from each other, or not even really do what we're doing today, right? Which is a virtual sort of discussion. And I'm assuming you guys are factoring some of that into your plans as well, because we just don't know what's going to happen.
COVID-19 really obviously threw everybody for a loop. Nobody saw it coming much more in advance of January, and we didn't plan for this at first, of course, because nobody did, and now we're having to do that. And one of the things that's going to happen if we do end up having to be 6 feet apart, or maybe working from home for the next year, there'll have to be a rigorous virtual assessment approach plan integrated into the assessment plan. So assessment planning is a really big part of what has to happen, in the weeks prior to an on-site assessment. If it's not on site, there's going to need to be extra things put in place to make sure that it goes smoothly, kind of like what we did today when we got on together and we made sure everything worked. Right. But it's going to be a lot more rigorous than that, because it's going to be, a day or more on site virtually with lots of different people involved. And so some additional planning will be required. We won't be able to just go out and do assessments as normal. We would have to have some additional planning and some additional preparation. And I'm sure you can expect that.
Yeah, definitely. In addition to all of the angst and anticipation for what you in your your teams are doing and all the work that you guys are doing, that's the next question that always kind of summarizes everything. Okay, well, how are you going to do this when maybe I don't let you in my door because you're coming from a stage or crossing a border where something is happening that I don't want to catch?
Yeah.
So I know you have another slide, and I wanted to allow you to.
Yeah, I wanted to. I have two more slides for you. So we are. What I just showed you before is our production plan, so to speak. It's what we are going to do once we are in full operational mode. But we have the board is committed to two things: to being a listening organization and to walking before we run. And I actually think of it as walk, jog, run, not walk and run. This is very complicated. There are people I've read, I read LinkedIn like anybody else, and Twitter. And as a matter of fact, I'm very active on those platforms. And there's lots of stuff going around about why can't we just throw assessors out in the street and get going? What's the AB up to? Why are they taking so long?
Believe me, I've definitely seen that activity. I've gotten a couple rocks thrown at me on your committee's behalf.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're volunteers, right? So we're not even, we're doing this in our quote unquote spare time. Although I would estimate I'm putting about 60 hours a week into AB work, and not, and I have a real job. Right. So, so there's that. But, and I'm not complaining about that. That's what we signed up for. But this is complicated stuff. We don't want to, Ben and I have gotten into, Ben is a good friend, and we've gotten into very heated debates about the complexity of this, and do we want to put things out in a certain way? And we both have very strong opinions about, and we actually violently agree. We just don't necessarily agree on the specifics sometimes, and it's good because we're working out all the kinks, right? And one of the kinks is that we have to test this out before we give 5,000 companies assessments, right? Before we allow that. So we are going to have this provisional. You can think of this as a beta program. It's going to start very soon. We're planning on putting application sites up in the next couple of weeks for two provisional roles. Well, one of them's a credentialed role. It's the provisional assessor. So a provisional assessor will have all the authority of an AB certified assessor long-term, but they will be in beta mode. The DoD is going to be controlling the contracts that they will permit assessments to be conducted against. So my understanding is that there'll be 15 contracts. They will be picking those, and those are the only assessments that will be done. Those will be completed before anybody else. So that means that only a limited amount of assessors will be able to conduct assessments. There won't be assessments for a lot of assessors to do right away because of this limit. And it's a good thing because we want to get all the kinks out. So provisional assessors will be accepted. They will be allowed to conduct assessments against the 15 contracts, which are, we don't know how many companies that is, but some have said 800, some have said 1,200. I don't think we know I don't think anybody knows because it includes all the subs and all the tertiary suppliers and those folks. We don't know the number depending on the contract, but we need a set of assessors to go out and conduct assessments, and we need them to participate in retrospectives and after action reviews and lessons learned workshops with us to help us improve the model based on their experiences, not the model so much as the method of the assessment method. So there will be a limited set. That doesn't mean that the AB isn't fully committed to getting as many assessors possible online as we can, as quickly as we can, but it does mean there'll be a short beta period for those 15 contracts to sort of work the kinks out of the system and make sure everything's working, get the systems identified and in place that we need, get the QA process all fleshed out and figured out so it's working credibly. And some of them will require assistance because some of these are big assessments. So we have a provisional assessment team member. So in the long-term model, there is a certified professional who can serve. You think of it as an assistant to the assessor, an apprentice to the assessor, someone who hasn't gone through the whole program, but they're knowledgeable and they work for the C3PAO. And we want to put them on the ground. I'm a C3PAO. I'm going to put an assessor on the ground, and I want to put a team around him or her. So I'm going to put these provisional assessment team members with them. and they are subject to some level of training, kind of yet to be determined, that will come from the provisional assessor with materials the AB gives them. So these are two roles that you can think that they're beta roles. That's another word that's been used.
Okay. Interesting.
And it'll be short term. So, and your next question is going to be, what does short term mean? Probably, but I don't have a precise answer for that. It's not really my call. It's more up to the DoD and when these contracts come out and the RFPs come out. But it'll be until that process is complete. Some people have said till the end of the year. Some people have said 3 or 4 months. I don't think anybody has a real handle on it, but the formal program will be here before we know it. So this is a temporary short-term measure.
Yeah, so the DoD, you know, in our discussions with Katie Arrington and members of her team that are just out there like crazy, working really hard, just like you guys are. Yeah. They talk about these initial set of contracts. Actually, these are new contracts, right? You're not going to be assessing things that are already in place. So these are going to be RFIs or RFPs that are going to be tagged with the CMMC level, and then the provisional assessors and the provisional assessment team members will go out and assess these companies, I'm assuming pre-award, so that as they're going through the RFP process at the end, and when it's time for a contracting officer and a source selection team to make an award, there's a determination as to whether the awardee, the intended awardee, can actually qualify based on the who qualifies or not, right? And they meet the CMMC level that the contract has been assigned. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. That's exactly the way I've heard it. I think it's definitely post RFP pre-award is the timing.
Okay.
The really interesting thing about that is that, of course, respondents to RFPs sign partnering agreements with subs or partners, meaning that all of those partners and subs will have to have successfully achieved CMMC level X, whatever the requirement is for them, before that prime can actually be awarded. So it'll be just super interesting to see how that plays out. I can't predict it, but there is a constraint there that prime is going to have to make sure that all the subs are successful, or else their bid won't be accepted. And
in this particular scenario, you have the situation where I guess everyone's being assessed, right? It's not the prime.
It's the same problem for everybody, yeah.
Right, and not relying on the self-attestation of a sub, right, through a survey or a set of questionnaires. They have to go through the complete cycle. So it's going to be interesting. But the fact that it's a beta program allows you, just like you said, to test what you're doing. It should calm the industry down, who's thinking there's going to be assessors crawling and knocking on every door immediately, right?
Yeah, it won't be happening.
That question that it's not.
And everybody, a lot of people are asking to be assessed. We hear from companies, or I do anyway, I hear from companies all the time saying, when can I get assessed? And the answer is, well, once we get through the 15, then it's an open market and anybody can get assessed. But first we do the 15, and it'll be really interesting because, of course, they've all been they've all been attesting that we self-assessed, and we all are. I've heard Ms. Arrington tell this story about, well, you've been telling us you're self-assessing, so it isn't going to be that hard for you. And I've been in the assessment, so I don't, I'm not predicting anything, but I've been in the assessment business for 20 years, and there's often a delta between self-assessment and outside assessor. So it's going to be interesting to see what those metrics add up to. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw modifications to strategy by the AB just based on the experiences we have with the provisional program.
Yeah, I've been reviewing statistics from existing C3 PAOs, in terms of the NIST 800-171, and just looking at what some of them who actually track statistics based on their experience. And I've been seeing where under the 800-171, they're seeing gaps. And I don't think I've read a report yet where there was a serious attestation, like a super duper 100% compliance. There was always struggles in different places. And the reports were really informative in that way, where they said, hey, this is where 97% of the industry, of our assessments where the companies struggled. Eventually they closed that gap, but initially, maybe not so much, until this independent assessment came in and identified that they hadn't really closed that particular gap, or, that particular element of their poem.
I think that a lot, I don't think there's anything nefarious going on. I think that, companies just, think they're proud of their work and they're proud of themselves, and especially smaller companies, tend to be generous in self-assessment. And I don't think it's nefarious as much as just, we really believe we're the best at what we do. And maybe, maybe an outside assessor kind of shows them that, well, there's other definitions of best in the world, and here's an example. And that's really what a maturity model is. If you look across the other maturity models in the market, they're really definitions of goodness, right?
Definitions of goodness, yes.
And we can debate about whether the authors of the various models were right in their definitions of goodness, and that's a fair discussion. But the federal government has decided that they're right, and that's really what matters in this scenario. And we can change models, and George Bach said all models are wrong, but some are useful. Right?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, let me show you. I know we've been talking, and I think we're almost out of time, but
yeah,
we have a similar set of data for the certified third-party organizations, the C3PAOs. And to just clarify, the C3PAO is a company or institution of some sort that is licensed to market and contract with organizations to conduct assessments. And the assessors, the certified assessors or provisional assessors, will either work for them on a W-2 basis or on a 1099 basis, because there will be independence, of course. And that is their role, is to manage that process, the contract process, the quality process, ensure everything is in order before it gets submitted, and they're going to take responsibility for that. A C3PO could have one assessor. It could be a one-person company that's made up of an assessor that also owns a company, or it could be somebody like Accenture or Deloitte, and it could have 100 assessors if they really wanted to. They probably won't do that, but if they wanted to get in that business, they could. So that's that. And then there's the two training organizations that we're accrediting. I think Ben probably talked about the licensed training provider and the licensed partner publisher, and they work sort of symbiotically, if you will. The partner publisher creates training materials, and the training provider delivers training classes on behalf of the AB. So the AB won't be delivering many training classes, will be licensing training providers through the credentialing program. And then finally, the most obvious one that everybody already knows about is the organization seeking assessment, the OSC it's being called internally. And this is the organization that says, hey, I want an assessment, and reaches out to a C3PAO. So those are the 4 accredited organizations that we're currently envisioning.
Fantastic. I know we have some questions, and I'm looking at time, and we'll go ahead into some of these questions that so you guys are getting hundreds of these. I've seen hundreds, let's just put it that way, and from across the globe. And this is, a pretty hot topic across all its components. So Jeff, I'm going to ask the first question here, and so some of these we may have answered. If that's the case, then we'll just move on to the next one. The first one is, how can companies interested in becoming a C3PAO register their interest in participating in the first Pathfinder group, kicking off by the end of this month or early May timeframe?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and the word Pathfinder is a bit overloaded at the moment. It's being used to define a number of different things. But I think you're referring to getting involved in those 15 contracts. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's probably what they're talking about. And you're correct. The word Pathfinder is getting a couple of different, I get it quite a bit here, as well.
It seems to be synonymous with pilot for a lot of people. That's the way I've been interpreting it anyway. But the good news is that there's 2 ways to do that. Of course, you can go to the AB website right now and sign up as an interested party. And there isn't a specific C3PAO sign up yet, but there will be. I'm told in the next couple of weeks or so, there will be a new site that goes up that is specific to C3PAOs applying to become C3PAOs. And the credentialing committee was involved very heavily in defining what data would we capture, How would we capture it? What are the requirements? And there will be an application process in the next few weeks. I don't want to put an exact date on it, but I'm told it's the next few weeks,
Right.
few weeks. And they will be able to go online, do it, and get on the list, and they will be evaluated by the AB, each and every one of them.
I would have a really good back end because I think, how when something's brand new, right, in our industry, everyone rushes to express an intent, and then as things, work out, they're like, oh, well, maybe not so much. I'll wait for this thing or this next thing.
Yeah.
But you're likely to get quite a few registrants.
I have a pool going on how many we're going to get. So we've got a little
yeah, that's
wagering money, but we got kind of a thing go like some people say, a couple of hundred, some say a couple of thousand. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, well, the last time we did something together, we were charting up to like 7,000 people getting on the line. So I don't know if that's any indicator. So
a lot better today. Yeah.
Yeah, how about that? So here's another question that we have. What are the guidelines requirements for C3 PAOs to be certified? I think you kind of answered that in the slides. I know Ben has done that, but I think what we have here is this is a popular question. U.S. companies with U.S. citizenship ownership. What about if I'm already ISO 17020 certified? Those kinds of things. Should I provide it, EIN DUNS number? That's kind of getting granular. There's going to be an application process where I'm sure data is going to get collected.
Sure.
But I guess the question of, do you have to be a U.S. owned company? I've seen that come up a couple of times across a couple of the different topics that we've been working on together.
Yeah, it's an item under discussion. There's a couple of camps, and I got to tell you that I don't have the definitive answer on that. There are some very influential people saying yes, U.S. citizen must be owned by a U.S. citizen. There are some influential people saying should be a U.S. person, which is technically as you probably know, technically a different definition.
Right.
So I'm reluctant to give it. I don't want to throw something out there that isn't yet fully baked. So
yeah, that's probably the right way to respond to that one, because I know it's out there. I recently was on a call with some folks that just met with some folks at the White House and the Pentagon, and there was a new presidential directive that came out and that listed some countries, and there were other countries like, aren't I your friend as well? Aren't you going to let me do this?
Yeah, so, there's a lot of politics in the answer to that question, and it's way above my pay grade, which, by the way, is 0 in this.
I know how hard you guys work, so hopefully there'll be some.
We should have it. We've asked the DoD the question, and I expect we'll know soon.
Yeah, so I think that's good. So let me go to this other question here. Will C3 PAOs be required to obtain a CMMC certification since they may be assessing FCI and CUI during their engagements? Of course, the answer is yes, right?
Yeah, the ISO cert, the 17020 and CMMC level 3 is a requirement, but of course not an initial requirement, because it's a wagging the dog kind of question. You can't have the assessment if you don't have an established company. And especially people that are, putting together small micro businesses because they're assessors. You can't say you're not allowed into this unless you have a CMMC certification. So there's going to have to be some sort of grace period that's yet to be defined. But yeah, you're right. If you are handling that kind of data, you will need to have some sort of certification.
Okay. So this next question is one that I've seen before as well. And I think the answer is simple, but obviously I'm going to let you answer. You're the expert. Will C3 PAOs be also able to conduct readiness assessments in advance of certification and a subsequent certification as long as they don't end up auditing their own work? So that's an interesting question, because they're saying we may go out and conduct readiness assessments, and we may actually get hired to go back and redo an actual assessment, even though the readiness assessment is not an accredited thing, right? So that's like an independent thing, but let me let you answer that.
Yeah, so that's like a gap analysis assessment you're talking about. And I think I told you earlier on that as soon as we have this wrapped up, we're really diving knee deep into the assessment methodology. We already have started that. And that exact question was debated last night in my working group call. And we haven't made a final recommendation on it yet. That we kind of got a split decision in the working group. I can see that there's potential conflict in there. There's definitely going to need to be preclusion of consulting organizations that are performing consulting than assessing their own work. So one of the things I've learned from my lifetime in the assessment business is that readiness assessments mean different things to different people. And so does consulting. So, I always say to my clients, if I am, sitting at your, computer and I am, codifying policies or procedures or control management or whatever it is, I can't assess you, right? That's an obvious conflict of interest. But if consulting consists of giving you advice on how to create a plan for moving the program forward so that you're successful long term, that's a different kind of consulting, right? So I think there's a lot of gray area in there that we're going to have to wade into. So I think it's a strong, solid maybe.
Yeah, because it's an interesting question, because like I said, your official assessment is a accredited process, right? And with a licensed individual, and then it's getting reviewed by this, someone, by the CMMC-AB. So there's an independent party that's going to review the results of that assessment. So then you have, is it a conflict of interest, if I do a readiness assessment as well, right?
When you start unpacking it all, it's very complicated. It isn't as
Absolutely.
There's some people that say, no way, conflict of interest. I'm like, okay, hold on a second. Let's unpack it.
Right.
First, let's define readiness assessment. Okay. And then once you start defining that, it's like, okay, well, if that's what it's going to be, then yes, that's a conflict. But if it's this other thing, maybe not. So we just have to figure that out.
Yeah, okay. That's one of those complicated questions, and you guys have a lot of them in the midst that I'm sure you'll answer as the process matures, as you guys achieve your maturity model with the organization, as you understand what some of this stuff means.
We've come a long way.
Yeah. So let's the last question, based on time, is accreditation at the individual level or at the organization level? I think that's an easy one. No super duper complex answers there, right?
So that question is the reason why we came up with the definitions of credentials versus accredited.
Right.
So individuals are credentialed, they are certified. Their credential is a certification.
Right.
We called it credential because we envisioned there could be other credentials besides certifications someday. Right. So an individual is credentialed, and the only kind of credential we have right now is certification of various types. Organizations are accredited. And when an organization becomes accredited, with the exception of the OSC, it's synonymous with licensed. Okay, so a C3PO is licensed, a LTP, a training provider, is licensed, a partner publisher is licensed to use AB intellectual property to perform tasks and make money, right? The only exception to the licensing category is the OSC. They get certified because of the CMMC has the word certified in it, right?
Right.
So an OSC is an accredited organization, and their accreditation is certification.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Fantastic. So look, this has been informative. I think the audience, when they see this, they're going to be just, again, I know they're waiting for some of these answers, and you guys have a very structured approach. You can tell the quality and the amount of time that's been invested in the critical thinking.
Thanks.
And you guys should be really appreciative of yourselves. And I think Nation owes you great appreciation for your volunteerism in this very important process that's going to help protect our nation. And so, Jeff, I'd like to thank Cisco as well for sponsoring this session through Cisco WebEx. They've been a great partner helping support these recordings and getting this information out into the community as they await for this very popular answer. And look, I need you and the organization and all your partners and your board members to stay healthy because we need you guys. We need you guys to get there and get this done. We're waiting for you. So I wish you guys the best of luck as you guys continue and the best health as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Armando. Great to meet you finally, and thank you for what you're doing, and stay healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you guys need me, I'm here. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.